When corporate data is lost, or worse, stolen by hackers, it can have disastrous results on a company's reputation and potentially lead to the closure of the business. With security breaches becoming more and more high profile, why do so many sysadmins put security on the back burner? Conversely, why are security admins seemingly so hard to work with when all the engineer wants to do is get the project done? In this episode, we will take a look at bridging the gap between security and operations. Welcome to the ExploreVM podcast. I'm your host, Paul Woodward Jr. Today's guest has not only spent years in the data center and security space, but also tormented me as one of the judges on Virtual Design Master. Edward, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Edward Haletky. I am an author and analyst, architect for virtualization and secure hybrid clouds. I've written several books on virtualization. Every one of those books featured security as a major part of the architecture and design. Actually, I wrote one book on virtualization, security, and design all by itself that is actually still apropos today. Just change a few names and you're there. I mean, I could rewrite it, but it actually ended up being, I was thinking about it. Someone said, well, why don't you rewrite your book? And I'm going, what would I change? That product no longer exists. I need to change the name to this. So I actually instead wrote a reference architecture for the secure hybrid cloud, which you can find on one of my sites. So you can go find it there. I did not start with security. This is a bit of history. My background is computational fluid dynamics and high performance computing and high performance computer graphics, as diametrically opposed to security as you can possibly get. So that's why I started that way, and I ended up in a virtualization security field.
So what was it about security and virtualization that pulled you away from your bunch of titles there?
No, I'm still an architect. I'm still an analyst. I'm still an author. Those haven't changed. My degree is in aeronautical and astronautical engineering, and that was part of the torment for VDM. No one's going to forget the distance between the Earth and the Moon. But what it ends up being is that I started with computational fluid dynamics. I started dealing with reams of data early. So I was working for one of the little-known large companies. Actually, it's very well-known. And I started setting up my own firewall just because I could. And I kept on getting gigabytes of log files and going, well, what do I do with these? So I turned on something called the forensics toolkit or the coroner's toolkit, and it gathered even more data. So by the end of one day, I had terabytes of data to go through for just one firewall running on Linux. So since then, I've always been fascinated by how I can get some value out of that data. But how I got into virtualization is another story. That came from me having a Mac, the world having a Windows machine, and me wanting to be able to run Windows, Mac, Linux, Unix, all in one place. And that happened in the late 90s. I was able to do that with either hardware and or software. I still have a workstation version 0.9 for VMware. That's where I started. It was a desire, a goal.
So today's topic, we're kind of looking to bridge the gap, extend an olive branch between ops and security, and try to help people, understand why it's important. Why do you think that the day-to-day sysadmin overlooks security so often? Is it just trying to keep up with workload? Is it too much of a process? Is it too much of a hassle? What have you seen? What are your thoughts on this?
I think it actually there's two major parts to this. One is until recently, the C-suite just didn't care. Okay? If the management is not really a big concern for security, then the rest of the worker bees won't be either. They're taking their lead from management. Management's now very concerned about it. Ransomware is incredibly hard. Matter of fact, the new strains of ransomware are such that they actually don't have keys to decrypt. if you get hit by something like that, you can pay them $1 million and they would still never give you the keys because they don't know them. So ransomware has hit some new nastiness. These have been problems going on because people have overlooked good security principles from the beginning. But why there's a combativeness between the two groups is because people think security is the land of no, and admin is the land of I got to get it done. And there's a fine balance between those, and you need to, instead of just barging straight ahead with the latest and greatest whatever, it may be worth just offering up to the security guys saying, we're going to do this no matter what. What are your thoughts? How can I do that? And for security guys, like, you know what? You've never heard of container or virtualization. It's about time you did some homework. To be honest, this is a new world. It's a new mindset. And that is key. That's the other thing is that I think most day-to-day administrators just don't have the mindset for security. Those people are very rare. It's not paranoia, but it's seeing beyond what you've already looked at. It's looking at a bigger picture. It's saying, hey, I'm doing X, whatever X is. Let's say I'm implementing Salt or Ansible or Jenkins or VRA or VRO, whatever it is, some package like Puppet or Chef, pick one. And if you're not looking at how it's being used, what will be exposed, that's the mindset, right? How many data center admins have that view? And I mean, I see you smiling. Do you have that view?
I definitely have picked up that view. We're going to say related to a certain competition from last summer. I look at things a little bit more on the whole versus just, I'm going to deploy this virtualization solution. And it's been years of learning and seeing and what's going on and trying to adjust and grow with the changing data center environment, for sure.
And that's true. That's the key is once you have a good mentor that can bring you down that path and expose you to that holistic view, or to be honest, it's really a systems engineering view. When you look at the system as a whole, you see different things. You can see the gaps. You can see the weaknesses. That's a view some security people don't even have, because right now there's a million jobs for security folks, and most of them are in this area called incident response. Incident response is responding to incidents that come up, and that incident could be, there was a performance problem. What happened? That's an incident. You could trace that performance problem to someone taking a left turn in the code, and that left turn led them to your database where they just grabbed all your users. So they exfiltrated a huge amount of data. That's bad. That gets in the headlines. That's even worse. But there's also the other side of that is that you need to look at it from how do I protect my data and how do I recover from any of these outages. I need a security recovery plan as well as I need a data recovery plan. So whenever I have a disaster, I have to deal with security issues and I have to worry about the data itself. This is a different mindset than even most security people have these days.
So I think you hit the nail on the head as the security department is viewed as the department of no and can't do this, can't do that. How do we help the security folks kind of step back from that? They get it. They understand why it has to be like this, but it can't be so authoritative. How do we help people ease into this is why it's no? Let me explain to you why it's no, and how can we work together on that?
Well, they're not really the department of no. What they are is security falls into a couple of different categories today. One is I have a compliance requirement. So a lot of security departments in a highly regulated industry are looking at purely at compliance. So they're the world of checkbox. Can I do this? Yes or no. Can I do this? Yes or no. It's very, very black and white. The more advanced organizations, compliance is a separate team, And security is looking at the holistic picture of, okay, compliance needs a control here. Wherever that control is, I need to do something. What is it that I have to do to meet security requirements? What do I have to do to meet compliance requirements? When that happens, you get a broader view, and it doesn't become no. It means that's a chance. If they say, well, I don't understand that, or, that's not the way we do things, that's a chance for you to educate them. But you need to speak their language, not them speaking yours. So if you're a virtualization admin and you cannot speak the basics of security, don't bother. Just like if you're a security guy and you're going to go to the virtualization team and say, I need X done, if you cannot speak to the virtualization admin in their language, they won't get it. So it's really a language barrier. People like myself cross that barrier. And that's the key. If you can speak both languages or all the languages you need, like networking, containers, virtualization, storage, security, DevOps, whatever you want to call it. I even speak development languages. It makes it easier to have that conversation. Instead of going to them and say, hey, can I do this? It's like, look, we need to do this. Can you help me do it in a secure way? That approach probably gets them to say, hey, let's look at this together.
How can the security team and the admins help the C-suite, the management, understand the importance of security when if you're in an environment where you see, we need this done now, doesn't matter, get it done. How do we help them understand the importance of doing it in a secure fashion?
Well, I'm going to fall back on a customer that I have for consulting that I've been working with for years. It took me 5 years to train him to ask me before he did something. And he's a C-suite. It's very important to start early. And you can't just say no. It's like, okay, we can do this. This is how much it's going to cost you, or this is the risk in doing it. Do you accept that risk? You need to, as the admin or the security admin or either one, is come up with that risk profile for any action. And that risk is not just about security. It's about performance. It's about cost. It's about, will my data be exposed and how much can I even protect it? It's also about, it's going to cost me 4x to do that, or doing that plan that you guys want me to do is going to be 4 times less performant than what we're doing now. How do we compensate for that? So risk has a lot of different issues. In this case, this customer is a high-performance computing customer. They're very secure, but they also are dealing with 44 billion queries a day with a 250 millisecond latency. That makes them a high-performance computing environment, and that's how they treat it. When they changed their mindset from treating it like a data center to treating it like an HPC environment, the world changed for them, and they were able to do a lot more than they do now. They used to do. But it took training. It took time to say, hey, you want me to do that? Here's the risk. But to do that, to say that's a performance risk, that's a cost risk, that's a security risk, you have to have that bigger view. You need to understand the architecture. So if you are an admin and only doing your little piece of the architecture, you can tell them that's how much it costs for your piece, or that's the risk to your piece. But what's the bigger picture? This is where that architect comes into play. And if you want to become an architect, you're looking at that level. It's bigger than my little world of administration. It's, I need to look at the entire picture. I need to figure out how networking impacts that, how security impacts that, how performance, making that change to the code means this change to the design. That's where everybody should be looking at the same design documents all the way up and down the stack. The architect doesn't create these just for himself. He creates them for everybody. So if you're the lowly admin and you've never seen the design docs, maybe it's about time to ask about them. So you can come up with those. We can call it pushback, but it's really like you've got choices. You need to say, instead of saying no, you need to say, hey, here are your choices. You want me to do X. We know X will cost me Y for performance and Z for risk and so forth. You need to put that together. And if you document it, you've done your due diligence. That's the most you can do. If they don't accept it, all you do is the next time it comes around, you build on that documentation and do more and more. Eventually, they'll get it. Either that or you just found yourself a new career.
Yeah, and so that kind of reminds me of, and I wish I could remember who it was. I was trying to remember a VMUG keynote I saw a few years back, and the speaker said, "Never tell the people no. It's always yes, but, and explain why there's a but." And that's definitely right in the same vein of what you were just talking about.
Absolutely, you cannot. I mean, to be frank, I've been thinking about this a lot. The DevOps movement really is about doing the right thing. It's when you think about it, that's what it is. And when you start thinking about what is the right thing, when you start talking about all this technology, most people are not trained or in schools or universities or even in wherever. They're not trained to do what we do today, right? But they're given a whole bunch of choices, and they can either choose to go down that path or not. When I first started, there were no books. There was no documentation. There was no professors. There was no predecessors except for the existing people that have been doing stuff for years. And what I found out is that, A, you need a good mentor or someone that you respect that you can read about or that. In this day and age, it's easy. Everybody and their uncle blogs or writes, and that's good. It gives us a whole bunch of mentors. You also need a flexibility of mind that prior to 10 years ago, we really didn't need. We were all like, prior to virtualization, to be honest, that flexibility was not necessary. Now we're going through another shift between virtualization, containers, software-defined this and that and everything. There's software-defined security, there's software-defined storage, there's software-defined network, there's network function virtualization. There's all these new terms and ideas that you need to be flexible enough to digest and work with and figure out, is that the right approach for us?
Before we shift gears, is there one, and this is going to seem, funny, is there one small piece of advice somebody listening to this conversation now can take away and just start doing at work to help improve security and security understanding?
Yeah, actually there is. Think before you do. Always think through what is the possible issues with implementing whatever you're implementing. Whether that, it doesn't have to be a security issue. It could be a performance issue. It could be an application degradation issue. It could be anything. If you're going to do something, you always should just stop back, slow down, and think about it before you do it. Maybe even write some questions down and get them answered. The least starts a list of questions about, hey, I don't know about this. Maybe I should ask about it. And that doesn't have to happen right away. You can actually ask those over time and get the gig done or the job done. But stop and think about it before you do it. It's like, hey, why am I doing this? Is that just because I've been told to? Or am I missing a bigger picture? Or, hey, I get it. Now I have these other questions. So it's really kind of like a stop, think, then do. And document all the the biggest thing I can say is document every question you have and document everything you've done. That institutional knowledge is vital. To be honest, it's all about mindset. If I can instill a mindset that says think before you do, it's the same thing. Do you cross the street without looking both ways?
Right.
This is really what we're talking about here. It's the most basic of human instincts to just go forward. But it's like sometimes you just got to say, whoa, let me look both ways before I cross that street. We've stopped doing that with the age of iPhone stuff. People just walk out without even paying attention.
Yeah.
And that's basically taking things to the other extreme. And they get run over, they get hit, and people get into arguments or other things happen is because someone put everybody at rest.
Mm-hmm.
I should have mentioned that, but to be honest, most of the stuff we're talking about is really situational awareness. Know your situation before you go off and launch. You know, in the CI/CD world, you only have maybe 15 minutes to make a security decision. So I should have said this, but everything needs to be automated. I mean, when you think about it, when we start talking about all this, security is really about situational awareness, but it's also about being able to repeat the same process over and over again and then measure that process to see if I've actually done the right thing. And if I haven't, correcting the process in an automated fashion. This is the basics of science. We haven't changed that, but we're trying to get the human out of the picture, except for that final analysis, that leap that only humans can do that computers can't do today. And I'm hoping they never be able to be honest. But that's getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
It's a very strange world out there right now.
Yeah, and everyone's so concerned that automation is going to take their job. That's actually a blog post I've got on the list right now. It's, you know, automation is not going to take your job. You just need to help keep your skills up to date, and use it as a tool to improve your efficiency.
This is not new. Back in the day, it was virtualization is going to take my job, and then it was like software-defined whatever is going to take my job, and now it's automation is going to take my job, or network function virtualization is going to take the networking's job. And it ends up being is that even though I've gone up stack and keep on going up the stack and pushing myself further and further, there is still a need for people to manage the low-level stuff. That's not going away anytime soon. If you want to stay in the networking realm and manage switches, there's a need to do that. If you want to stay in the server realm and never push and never deal with software, guess what? There's a need to manage that server anyways. And by the way, you're dealing with software anyways. It's all software. There's a need for those people and that knowledge. I haven't seen a performance management or root cause analysis tool that can answer to the questions that I had to answer relatively midway through my career. And I keep on asking the same questions over and over, and no one's been able to answer them because the tools don't know how to answer them yet. So there's going to be a need for people with their knowledge, and that's not going to go away. Now, capturing institutional knowledge, that's new, and that people are trying to find ways to do that. Our careers are changing almost every 2 to 3 years now. You know, it used to be people stayed at a job for 15, 20, 30 years. Then it went down to maybe 10 or 15, then 5 to 10. Now we're at a 2 to 3 year career cycle. So your knowledge about an institution's or an organization's security or architecture or way of doing things or culture becomes incredibly vital for you to record in some manner that they can keep it and use it themselves while you're actually at the job. That's what, I mean, it sounds boring, but documentation is still important. Just how we do documents changed. So I don't see you losing anybody losing a job anytime soon if they don't keep up.
Right. Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to take a brief moment to make an open call for guests. Great content comes from those who are willing to share and help others. If you've got a passion for anything tech, have a great new product, or came up with a way to solve a complex problem, contact me. I'd love to have you on as a guest. Let's keep the ExploreVM podcast train moving along. And let's be honest, no one wants to hear me talk to myself. Now, back to the conversation. But now I think the second half I'd like to talk about technology trends when it comes to security, what's kind of happening within data center environments, network environments, what do you see, what are you implementing for your clients, that kind of thing?
I see a trend at the high end, the high performance computing end, to move security into the application or as close as you can get to it. Because modern firewalls are, well, up until about 3 or 4 years ago, modern firewalls couldn't keep up. So now they can, they're bigger and they're costly. So moving it close to the application reduces my costs and actually in a lot of ways may reduce my risk. It allows me to move my application between clouds. It allows me to move my application into containers, into virtual environments, back to physical environments. So I see a shift on the high end. And by high end, I mean billions of queries a day away from perimeter defense. In the virtualized and secure hybrid cloud world, I'm seeing a lot more of the proxy approach, the cloud aware security broker, the management aware security broker. So basically a lot more, hey, let me put something beside what you're doing that intercedes with what you're doing so I can actually make sure you're doing the right thing in my SaaS environments. I'm seeing that. When I look at the actual data center, I don't see a data center anymore. I see this hybrid environment that has security tendrils everywhere, but almost no unification. And I see a push in the industry to find the unification, the way to view that in a way that makes sense. And that's a difficult task. That's incredible. Purely from the security perspective, I'm seeing a lot more deception technologies come into play for breach detection. The biggest problem we have with why we need so many people doing incident response is that breaches happen, but people don't know they happen. The average lifetime of a breach 3 years ago was over a year. Now it's closing the gap, I think, and I'm not positive about this, someone can look it up, that we're down to about 56 to 60 days. That's still a long time. I need it 5 minutes. I want to do breach notification as fast as I humanly, physically can, or not even humanly. I want it done automatically. That's the key, and that's why you have a lot of new technologies that are trying to do that. I see a lot more artificial intelligence and machine learning, or behavioral analysis is another way of looking at those two. I see a lot more deception technologies coming into play where you put out deceptive VMs. It's basically a huge honeypot that people get caught in. It looks like real things. They put deceptive IDs out and things in memory and even on disk. I see a lot more of that. And that's all because we're trying to figure out who's attacking our systems and if they already have.
On the infrastructure side, are you seeing more and more use of network virtualization and segmentation, such as VMware's NSX?
I see a lot of talk around microsegmentation, and there's 3 ways that I know of to implement microsegmentation, and I've seen all 3 in industry. The most prevalent one is not actually the way NSX does it. That's only valid in the VMware world. I see a lot more, you're going to have a local firewall and I'm going to control it remotely. So on a Linux machine, I may be having an agent that talks to IV tables or an agent that drops SYN packets so you can't actually make the connection based on various things. I may see, someone controlling the Windows firewall. So I see a lot more of that. In the container world, I see a lot more privileged access containers that are acting as that network gateway. So they're saying, if you're coming from that container, I'll allow you to contact that container. So I see a lot more happening at layer 7 than I do at the other layers right now. So there's a lot going on. It's coming to grips with all that and saying, hey, in my environment, which one's the most one that makes sense? Do you have containers in use? So one of those others may be useful. Do you have virtual machines in use? Maybe if you're using vSphere, maybe NSX is the right way. If you're not, is one of the other products out there the best one? There's several that do what I was talking about. Is if you're prevalent to breaches or you're in a highly regulated environment, maybe you want the deception technologies and how they fit in become very interesting. Maybe you just need behavioral analysis. Maybe you need more control around your mobile devices. It's a big question. And the problem is security is not just one topic. It's this overarching topic that covers so many different processes and protocols and products, in categories of products, that's very hard to say what you need and what you don't need until you look at your whole environment.
So, in the realm of keeping data in data centers and servers and everything secure, what's your stance on BYOD? Is that a big risk? If it's managed right, is it acceptable? Clearly, that's kind of like the way environments are going.
I think it's fine.
Okay.
You just have to have the right controls in place to ensure that data that you don't want on those personal devices doesn't end up on those personal devices. That's it. Now, some people have gone the realm of saying you must use our MDM, our mobile device manager, for our data so that when they leave the company, they can just say, get rid of the data. That's fine. If it's a case of I'm bringing my own laptop or I'm bringing my own iPad, they have you can set up a internal VDI environment that basically says I'm going from unsecured to secured. Your VDI environment would be the secured environment. The laptop, the BYOD would not be. They would be on a segment of the net that's basically outside your network. That's the way I would do it. That's actually the way I've implemented it. I've kind of done, it's like you got road warriors that are coming from outside to inside. Then you have changes in security level where you're going inside to inside. With that change, if you're going from a low security to a higher security, you need to implement things like jump machines, which in a lot of ways are just VDI environments. Well, if it's BYOD, that's a very low security bar to a higher security bar, my internal network. It's the same approach. You give them a jump machine or a VDI environment that you can control. That way they can use their device. You don't care. They don't get any data on it, or they only get data you want them to have.
As I did.
By the way, this works in Amazon as well. I've actually had one company I was doing a contract for, and they basically said, "Hey, we'll allow you in, but you have to go through Amazon to get in." It's like, okay, that's no problem. I was using my own devices. They gave me a jump machine effectively to get in and do the research I needed to do for them.
So, as I pointed out in the introduction, you were one of the judges for Virtual Design Master. With Season 5 kicking off in the next couple of months, I know the registration is going to open up soon. Why did you stress adding a security component to the challenges of Virtual Design Master?
I bet that was a shock for everybody that was part of the contest. The reason being is that with security starts with architecture and design. You can't just bolt it on. You have to start from the very beginning. So one of the most basic things that I can instill in someone, or any security guy can instill in someone, is to say, start with architecture. Bolt-ons just never work. If you can properly architect and design in security from the very beginning, believe me, it's so much easier to update it, to keep it in sync, to grow it, to pursue that path. It's a mindset issue for people doing design. And what I found was in the industry, there's this dearth of designs and reference architectures that actually start with security or even pull it in. I mean, I had one that is for a well-known company, I won't give their name, who said, "Hey, look at my architecture." And I looked at it and I said, "This isn't an architecture." And they said, "Oh, yeah, it is." It's like, no, it's not. It's a list of products. You don't tell me how to use them. You don't tell me best settings. You don't even tell me best practices. How can this be an architecture? I had another one. They said, "Here's the architecture." And it was basically a spreadsheet with VLANs on it. That's great for networking, but doesn't do anything for anything else. So I noticed this big gap. And that's why I went to the VDM folks and said, "Hey, why don't we do a season with security? Because I think it's important." And it really is. These days, it's very important. I know you guys, as the contestants, I'm sure you were behind the judges' backs just grumbling.
Well, we were grumbling about everything, so it wasn't just security. So trying to work full time, spend the remainder of my free time designing solutions, writing it up, implementing. So, but we knew what we signed up for when we volunteered.
Absolutely. And the thing is that if you look at the way even the VMware validated designs, they mention security and they give control points, but they're not explicit about it. Or many of the VCDX designs that I've seen are not explicit about security. It's kind of like voodoo. It just kind of happens, and I'm just wondering how it happens if you don't tell me how it happens. So now I'm hoping the VDM folks will, when they start at least doing their designs, have a taste of what it requires to get even better, to go forward, to do what you need to do and include it from the beginning. And just as a side note, when I started using ESX in 152 days, so 2004, 2003 timeframe, and I actually did a talk because I was talking to some oil and gas folks. I had a question about how something was working. I'm going, well, why isn't this behind a firewall? And they go and look at me and go, why would this be behind a firewall? It's like, this is a virtual environment. This is the keys to your kingdom. If I can get into this, I own everything. This is the door to your data center, effectively. And they're going, well, no, it's not, but it is. I mean, you're giving me remote access to basically everything. I can download VMs, I can get memory, I can look at your data, all from one easy location. And that started an actual interesting conversation that led to my first talk on virtualization and security at a oil and gas get-together up in Dallas. But it was very eye-opening for them to hear that, this stuff needs to be protected because they've never heard that. And so it starts with someone just saying, you need to think about this. Think outside that box.
And with our last few minutes here, is there anything you'd like to add to any topic we've covered today?
Yeah. Well, I just want to reiterate, modern IT takes a flexibility of mind that in our industry is hard to come by. People start off in one area and they kind of get stuck. So if you have people that are constantly saying no, and whether they're an admin, a security, or compliance guy, maybe they're stuck and they need a push or a budge in the right direction. Be that. Don't sit idly by and accept it. Go on and think about it. Go forward and say, hey, I don't agree with that. You can do I don't agree in a very professional manner. That's better than saying wildly, I just don't agree with that. Let's pick your four-letter word. But be professional about it. If you do have a disagreement, just have a professional disagreement, agree to disagree, but have a nice, calm conversation. That, hands down, will win you more friends in the space than the arguments will. And that is the last bit of advice for dealing with the security team. You cannot get upset, even if they do. You just cannot show that. Some people do that, some people don't. I mean, you just got to think about that. Humans are humans. You need to be professional. And that's going to be key to a career.
So if we've inspired somebody today to look a little bit deeper at security after listening to our conversation, what are some good resources to start to look at security for your data center, for your network, for your systems on a whole?
Well, if you are actually working for a large organization, you all have a security team or even a compliance team, talk to them. See if you can find out if someone's willing to talk to you or be your mentor. That would be the first place I would look. If you're looking for online resources, there's 1,000,001 of them. For virtualization security, there's the books I wrote, there's books that Davi Ottenheimer wrote. So there are some books you can get online, at Amazon that are cover security. To be honest, the majority of them do not. If you're looking at hybrid cloud these days or looking at containers, you need to change your mindset, and that's a big thing. I wrote a reference architecture that's publicly available, and I'll give you the links for that. That's a good start for getting as deep as you want to get. It's 70 pages and very, very deep. Gets deep quickly. V. Brownback has had lots of talks on security. I've done them and other people have done them. So if you're in the virtualization space, that's a good part. If you're in the container space, learn from what the virtualization folks have done. It's not that different. There's just different places to place security, not different types of security. So there's a lot you can learn there.
Well, Edward, I want to thank you for your time and your input today. Where can people find you online?
Texiwill, Texiwill, just about everywhere. You can find me at Twitter at Texiwill, on Google Plus as Texiwill. And you can even mail my Gmail account, even though it just forwards to my real account. You can even find me on several things like Skype. I mean, my handle hasn't changed. If you see me on Slack, I'm Texiwill there. Texiwill everywhere. And that's an old name, so it's been around for a while.
And I would assume, does that include a domain that you blog at as well?
Actually, I blog at several. www.virtualizationpractice.com is my analyst location. I blog more on general subjects there, not incredibly deep technical, except for the reference architectures. They're very technical. We are now doing a lot of product coverage, so that's actually getting into the technical realm again, but it's there to say what's the strengths and weaknesses of all the products. And we've actually started doing, every product we've looked at has a security piece, so we're bringing that into our product reviews type of approach, that coverage graph. But I also blog very technically at www.astroarch.com/blog. Astroarch is the name of my consultancy.
All right, I'll be sure to get those links in the show notes. And once again, I want to thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for listening. If you'd like to join the conversation, follow me on Twitter at ExploreVM, find me on Facebook, or email me, paul@explorevm.com. Once again, thank you for listening. Now that I lost my train of thought. 1 second here.
Choo, choo, choo. Sorry.
That's all right.